Welcome to Taking Up Space with Jordan, the podcast where we dive deep into the mindsets and beliefs that shape how we live and dream. I'm your host, Jordan, a life coach dedicated to empowering women to break free from societal expectations and design the life that they've always wanted. Today, I'm going to be continuing with this little mini series on how to navigate the lows of building your dream life. And honestly, I'm feeling much more motivated this week, something that I honestly wasn't able to say a little while ago. Last week, I was feeling very stuck. My days were starting to feel like Groundhog Day, the same routine over and over. And while routines are so powerful, I'm a big advocate for them. Sometimes we need to shake things up. So I made some small intentional changes. I took a different route on my morning dog walk. I worked out on a Saturday morning, and then I spent time in a coffee shop just writing. I also committed to getting ready every single day this week, and just a little eyeliner, mascara, doing my hair. Nothing major, but it was enough to shift my energy. These little choices broke up the monotony and made me feel more put together and surprisingly helped boost my creativity and overall mood. And that's really key. And that's key especially during these long winter months when motivation can feel non-existent or hard to find. What this week taught me, though, is that motivation slumps don't mean that I'm failing or that I lack discipline. For a while, I was beating myself up before not doing my laundry, not cooking my usually healthy meals. But I had to remind myself that this happens to everyone, even the most driven people. And I do definitely consider myself to be one of those types of people. So today, we're going to be talking about exactly that. How to navigate a motivational slump, understanding the difference between a slump and a burnout, and most importantly, how to reignite your motivation. So let's get into it. Little Diet Coke break for a second. Okay, so I broke this down into parts because I really think it's important to understand each individual part and how it plays into another. And so these parts will all kind of build along, and the transcript will be down below. So if you're wanting to skip around, you're more than welcome to, but I do highly recommend listening to it, part 1, part 2, part 3. I would design it that way. So let's get into part 1. Part 1 is understanding the motivational slumps. So why do motivational slumps happen? They can come from a number of sources. They can come from mental exhaustion, burnout, societal pressures, emotional stress, or even just a simple lack of clarity. When we're experiencing high levels of stress in our relationships, work, family life, our motivation naturally takes a hit because we don't have the time, energy, or capacity to focus on our goals and dreams. And if we don't take time to address these underlying issues, what starts as a slump can turn into something much worse, which is burnout. So think about it. Have you been feeling more irritable lately? Has your appetite changed? Do you feel drained and unmotivated? No matter how much sleep you get, it doesn't matter. You're always tired. If so, it's worth pausing to reflect. It's worth asking yourself, just taking a step back and going, what's been weighing on me lately? Maybe it's something outside of your control. Work has been overwhelming. You're dealing with a family illness, or life has just been nonstop. Something that can happen to all of us. Or maybe you need to set some boundaries around your time and energy. When we take a moment to check in with ourselves, our emotions, our stress levels, and even our general vibe, it becomes easier to pinpoint why we're feeling stuck. For me, the whole month of January was a struggle. My dog was sick, which meant sleepless nights, constant cleaning, and an overwhelming sense that my day-to-day life revolved around this 4-legged creature, and it was something that I couldn't control. For weeks, all my energy went into taking care of my pup. And because of that, I had zero motivation to work on my podcast, go to the gym, eat well, or even, full disclosure, hang out with friends. I wasn't lazy or unmotivated. I was spent. And as time passed, I started to recognize the signs of burnout starting to creep in. So you might be asking yourself, what is the key difference between a slump and burnout? Well, it's time. A slump is temporary, maybe a week or two of feeling off. Usually it's something we can move past with small little adjustments. But when that feeling lingers for weeks, months, or even longer, that's burnout. And burnout isn't just a dip in motivation. It's a full body exhaustion emotionally and physically. I have been burned out before twice in my life, both times because of work. The first time I had no motivation to do anything. I didn't want to see friends. I wanted to sleep all the time, but I couldn't sleep because my body was on high alert with anxiety. My moods were all over the place, and no amount of PTO could fix the bone-deep exhaustion I was feeling. I even went to Hawaii. but I had no goals, no drive, just a fear of being seen as flawed or incapable. And that is not a good motivator. The only thing that truly helped me recover was taking time away and taking time off. Now, in my case, I had the option to leave my job entirely, but I know that's not always realistic. Sometimes stepping away isn't financially possible. So quitting or taking a long break isn't an option. How do we navigate burnout or even just a motivational slump? The first step is giving yourself a break. Before anything else, stop beating yourself up for not being motivated. Just stop. Shame is not a productive fuel source. When we try to shame ourselves into action, we're listening to our inner critic, the voice that comes from fear, anxiety, societal pressures. It is not coming from our true inner voice. It's not coming from our true selves. And that voice, it doesn't push us forward. It keeps us stuck. So instead of criticizing yourself, try extending some compassion. Give yourself some grace. Recognize that motivation is going to ebb and flow. And that doesn't mean that you're failing. You know what it means? It means you're human. So now we're going to start moving into part 2, which is the power of awareness. And this is how we're going to start identifying our slump triggers. So I want you to take a second and I want you to pause and I want you to reflect, especially if you are currently facing a slump right now. I want you to take a deep breath and I want you to pause this episode after each question and I want you to think, really think for a second. First is, when did you start feeling this way? It doesn't have to be a specific time or day, but when did you start feeling like you were in a slump? Second, what has been draining me lately? Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's your home life is out of balance. Pause. Think about it. And finally, number 3, am I physically exhausted, emotionally drained, or mentally overwhelmed? For any of these questions, there are no wrong or correct answers. Remember, it's all about your feelings, and your feelings are valid. But naming them starts to create that awareness piece. And when we become aware of our issues and problems, then we can start to discover the solution. Identifying if the slump is tied to external circumstances like a difficult life event or an internal block like the fear of perfectionism. This can really start to give us perspective on where we need to put our focus and work through our slump. So part 1, just as a recap, was all about understanding what is a slump versus a burnout. And the main thing is time. A slump is going to be something that lasts for maybe 1 to 2, I would argue even 3 weeks to a month. But burnout is something that is going to be longer. If you're starting to feel this way, I'd say longer than 6 to 8 weeks. If you're waking up every day and you're feeling tired, exhausted, or even most days, then it's maybe time to look within and see what's going on and see if you are experiencing some burnout. And by doing that, which leads us to part 2, which is getting awareness and checking in with ourselves and checking in with our emotions to see what is going on. Is it due to external circumstances, or is there something going on inside that is preventing us from taking the next step on our motivational journeys to our goals and dreams? We're going to start getting into the practical strategies we need to reignite that motivation. Because once you've identified that you're in a slump and have pinpointed why it's happening, the next step is slowly reigniting that spark. And I emphasize slowly, because when we're coming out of a burnout or a slump, we are depleted. We need to rebuild our strength and our energy and take care of ourselves. Because if we push ourselves too hard, too fast, we risk burning out again. The goal here is sustainable motivation. Practical strategy number 1. When motivation is low, aiming for big, ambitious tasks can feel impossible. Instead of waiting for motivation to strike, though, we need to focus on micro wins. These are small, achievable steps that help us build that momentum without overwhelming ourselves. For example, if you're struggling to work out, don't force yourself to commit to a full hour session at the gym. No, instead, we're going to start small. We're going to start micro. We're going to start with just going on a 5-minute walk. Once those 5 minutes are up, check in with yourself. If you feel like going longer, go ahead. Great. If not, guess what? You've still achieved the win. When we make our goals more manageable, they stop feeling so daunting. It helps us to rebuild our self-trust and confidence with each small victory, because success is going to breed more success. So if you're struggling with productivity, instead of aiming to finish an entire project, set a 10-minute timer and focus on just starting. Often getting started is our hardest issue. Strategy number 2. Strategy number 2. One of the biggest culprits of motivation slump is stagnation. When we do the same things in the same places day after day, it's easy to lose our spark. This is where a reset ritual can help. A reset ritual is about shaking up your environment and energy to shift your mind space or shift your mindset. So the first thing, declutter your space. A cluttered space can create mental fog. Take 10 minutes to tidy up your desk or organize a corner of your home. Change your surroundings. If you work from home, try going to a coffee shop or a co-working space for a few hours. You could also try just changing your soundtrack. Try a new playlist, a podcast, or audiobook, something that stimulates your brain in a fresh way. And finally, move your body. Even 5 minutes of stretching, dancing, or walking can help reset your energy. I like to call it just getting the wiggles out. This past weekend, I was feeling stuck. And so instead of working from my office, which is what you see here if you're watching on YouTube, I associate this space with my full-time job as well as my podcast. So I sit in this space often for many hours. So instead, I decided to take my laptop to a coffee shop. I put on a cute little practical outfit, and I worked for a few hours with a friend. And I felt so much more productive and inspired simply because I wasn't in the same space I spend every single day in. So try this. If you're feeling mentally sluggish, put on your favorite song and literally dance your ass off. Dance, jump around, or do a silly movement for a few minutes. No one's watching. It's your home. It may feel ridiculous, but I promise you it's going to be an instant energy reset. Because honestly, I feel like a lot of us, we just don't dance enough. We don't move our bodies enough in a way that just feels fun and feels silly. Do you remember when you were a kid and your favorite song would come on? You didn't care who was looking at you. You didn't care what you were doing. You just knew that you needed to move your body and you needed to wiggle. So try that. Try resetting your body by just getting up, putting on your favorite song, and getting those wiggles out. Step number 3 is reconnecting with your why, or I should say practical strategy number 3. When motivation is low, it's really helpful to reconnect with the why, as in why we started this in the first place, why we started on this goal, on this journey, why did we have this dream? Because here's the thing, sometimes we realize that our why has shifted, and that's okay. Take some intentional time, free of distractions, and just reflect and ask yourself, why did I set this goal in the first place? Does this goal still align with who I am and what I want in my life? And if I had to explain why this dream is so important to someone, so important to me, and I had to do that to someone I love, what would I say to them? Recently, I had this little moment while on a walk. Normally, I'd like to journal and to process all my thoughts, but that day I was feeling overwhelmed and super jittery, and I just knew I needed to move. So instead, I reflected while I walked. I didn't have my headphones on. I don't even think I took my phone. And I realized that my why and my actions were not aligning with each other anymore. I was trying to do too much too soon, and it was burning me out. That realization helped me make more intentional choices moving forward about where to focus my energy and what I actually want realistically going forward for myself. So try this. If journaling feels too structured, because I know it can for a lot of people, try a walk and talk approach. Record a voice memo of yourself talking through your thoughts as you walk. It can feel, honestly, like a moving therapy session, and it is so cleansing and helpful to do. All right, for strategy number 4, sometimes when we're stuck, we need new voices and we need new perspectives. And we need this so that we can shake ourselves out of our rut. If you've been listening to the same podcast, reading the same authors, or consuming the same type of content, it might be time to mix it up. It might be time to shake things up for yourself. I have personally been listening to the Mel Robbins podcast to help me with a lot of my motivations. I've been actually listening to some of her older episodes rather than her new ones. I also started reading a couple of different types of books. I usually tend to focus a lot on trying to expand my knowledge when it comes to operating a business. And so instead of continuing on that, I have been reading different books. This one including Spilled My Water right when I was about to start showing this book. So that was fun. But I have been reading Happier Now by Natalie Kogan. And it's basically, the idea is how to stop chasing perfection and embrace everyday moments, even the difficult ones. And I have been really liking this, especially because the biggest thing about it has been that sometimes when we are stuck in our routines, which I mentioned this earlier, this has been a really powerful book in understanding that there is beauty in every single moment. Me and Sam Cahoon talked about this as well, about finding the joy and finding the magic in the everyday. And I'll link that podcast episode down below. And this was just kind of a reminder of that, plus with that conversation with him. And one specific section that I really liked was about embracing your stress. And what it says is most of us experience stress often. So this is a good exercise to practice. When you're stressed, allow yourself 10 to 15 minutes to feel it. Literally give yourself permission to fully embrace your stress. Take out your journal and write down everything that is stressing you out, big and small. Seeing your stress on paper will help you observe it rather than being overwhelmed by the feeling of it. When your 10 to 15 minutes is up, take a breath and give yourself permission to move on. I highly, highly recommend this book. I don't get any money from this. This is not my book. This is Natalie Kogan's book. I'll link it down below. It is very good. Highly recommend it. So that's just one book that I have been reading to help kind of shake things up. And consuming the same type of content over and over, sometimes it starts to not speak to you because you're like, this is the same message that I'm hearing. It's like, you're like, oh, stay motivated, keep going, keep fighting for things. And so sometimes you just need to shake it up. So for me, I intentionally sought out those new podcasts and books. I read some more fantasy books that I really hadn't been taking the time to read. I'd been putting them on my TBR and not checking them out. And so sometimes just hearing fresh insights will help to shift your mindset. So try something. If you're stuck on trying to find a podcast or book, ask a friend for their recommendations, especially if they read or listen to stuff outside of your usual genre. Sometimes inspiration comes from the most unexpected places. Strategy number 5 is leaning on your community. One of the biggest mistakes we make when we're struggling is trying to power through it alone. I used to think that my community only wanted to cheer me on, but only when I was doing great. But that's not how real support systems work. Your community wants to be there for you in the highs and the lows. Give them the chance to show up for you. Be honest about where you're at. Tell a trusted friend, mentor, or online community that you're feeling stuck. Ask for encouragement, not just advice. Sometimes we don't need solutions. We just need someone to say, I see you. You're doing your best. And part of that is also finding someone that can act as accountability buddy. If you're struggling to stay motivated, having a check-in with a buddy can be super helpful because you're like, I have this person that I am staying accountable to. I need to check in with them to let them know how I'm doing. Because a little support can go a long way when you have somebody there that's in the trenches with you. Strategy number 6 is embracing rest without guilt. No matter which strategy you choose, I don't care which one, embrace your rest without guilt. Our culture glorifies constant productivity. We constantly feel like we need to be doing something. We're all afraid to just say, I'm doing fine. Life is lifing and I'm chilling. What is so wrong with saying that? What is so wrong with not having a new update for yourself? What is so wrong with the update being the same as it was last week or the week before that? What is wrong with the update of, I'm just resting right now? Because sometimes a slump is our body and mind's way of demanding that you rest. If we keep ignoring that signal, we risk crashing into full-blown burnout. Because rest is not laziness. It's a necessary part of the cycle of motivation. Listen to your body. If you're exhausted, let yourself sleep. If you're mentally drained, take a break from screens. Redefine what productivity means to you. because sometimes resting is the most productive thing that you can do for yourself. So try this. Schedule a guilt-free rest day where you do nothing productive. See how much better you feel afterward. No matter which strategy you choose, all of these strategies that I've mentioned up to this point are all actions that you can try and take today. But here's the thing. We also need to put in place some strategies to help prevent future slumps, because more than likely, you are going to experience another one. Because life doesn't stop for us, even when we really need it to focus on our goals. How many of you have ever wanted to be like, hold up, life, I need a moment. So we need to implement strategies that are going to help us long-term, which leads us into part 4, long-term strategies to help prevent future slumps. One of the best ways to prevent future slumps is by establishing motivational rituals like small but intentional check-ins. These are going to help you stay grounded before burnout sneaks up on you. What does this look like in practice? It means setting aside dedicated time to reflect on where you are mentally, emotionally, and physically. Too often, we don't check in with ourselves until we're already too deep into a slump. But by incorporating this practice into your routine, you can actually catch those warning signs early. So try this. Each morning or at the start of your week, take a moment to ask yourself, how am I really doing right now? And be honest with yourself. And remember, it's your thoughts. If they start drifting into, well, so-and-so is struggling with this, stop. This check-in is about you, not anyone else. Prioritizing your well-being is an act of self-care, and it allows you to show up for others from a place of fullness, not depletion. Personally, I have actually been doing this every Friday as a reflection ritual. Every Friday morning, I pause to evaluate how my week went. What went well, what fell off, and how aligned am I feeling with my goals? I also ask myself, what can I adjust or improve for next week? This simple habit has made a huge difference in how I manage my energy and motivation. Because you don't need to have this long journal entry or a complicated process. Just 5 minutes of checking in with yourself can go a long way. And again, it's about you. Because remember, we do need to believe in starting small here. Small, consistent habits are what you're going to need in order to build those big changes. So stop focusing on what's going on with everybody else. Stop absorbing everybody else's problems and take that 5 minutes to just go, what is going on with me? How can I show up for me? Think you can do that? Our next strategy, long-term strategy, is avoiding that perfectionism trap. Because in summary, done is better than perfect on some days. We have to let go of this idea of perfectionism. If you're constantly chasing perfect, you're going to stay stuck in a cycle of procrastination, self-doubt, and frustration. Instead, adopt the mindset that done is better than perfect. Perfectionism is often going to be fueled by fear of failure, fear of judgment, or not being enough. It's that inner critic taking the wheel, convincing you that if it's not flawless, it's not worth doing. But here's the truth. Your inner critic is operating from anxiety, not your true self. When you start to feel paralyzed by perfection, pause. Ask yourself, where is this pressure coming from? Is this really about my standards, or is it the fear talking? When we allow ourselves to be human, to create, to try, to make mistakes, we open the door for progress. Life isn't about hitting a perfect 45-degree angle on everything. It's about showing up, learning, and moving forward. So next time you catch yourself obsessing over the tiny details or hesitating because something just isn't right, take a breath and remind yourself, imperfect action is still action. Growth comes from doing, not from waiting until everything is perfect. Well, I hope today's episode has at least left you feeling a little more motivated, or at the very least, given you the tools to start reigniting your spark. Remember, slumps are normal, and more importantly, they're temporary. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You're simply in a season that will pass. If you're struggling with burnout, please don't suffer in silence. Reach out. Tell someone. We are not meant to carry our struggles alone. Be loud in your grief if you need to be. Be loud in your anger. Be loud in your joy. Be you loudly. The people who love you want to support you, but they can't if they don't know that you're struggling. Before I close, I want to leave you with this reminder. A moment of failure, a moment of frustration, or inaction does not define you. What matters is how you choose to move forward. Your strength is always there. It's just waiting for you to tap into. So if you're feeling unmotivated or stuck right now, I challenge you this. What's one small action you can take today to shift your energy? Doesn't have to be big, just one step. Because momentum starts with movement. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you have any go-to strategies for staying motivated, I'd love to hear them. Drop a comment or send me a DM. And if you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the podcast is by liking, sharing, and spreading the good vibes, aka the word. Remember, your dreams are worth it, even on the hard days. Keep going, keep dreaming. You've got this. Kisses.